do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
Hello everyone. I've saved the best for last. If you've been paying close attention over all of these videos, you will know that my favorite team is the Golden State Warriors, and you've probably seen it in my wardrobe. Well, just for you all, I have worn all of my Warriors gear today. Actually, that's not even true. Not even all of it, but everything I'm wearing right now is Warriors related. Of course, you have the hat for the city, you have my Klay Thompson jersey, I've got the Warriors shirt on Dub Nation underneath, you can see my shorts, Golden State, my socks, Klay Thompson. So, approximately 50% of my wardrobe is probably Warriors related. So on any given day, it's a pretty good chance that you'll see me in one of these items. And tonight, I've worn all of them because we are going in depth on my favorite team in the NBA, a team that I have spent a very, very long offseason thinking about what they might do this offseason, what they might do in the draft, the potential for the trade exception, all of that. I'm warning you right now. This is going to be a long video. We are going very much in depth on everything that the Warriors can do. I don't care. If you're not a Warriors fan, you might not like this one as much. Whatever, that's fine with me. I'm just gonna make it because this is what I love to do and this is what I love to talk about. So I'm gonna do my best to get all of the basic stuff out of the way first, all the key players, salary cap stuff, and basic draft information. And then after I get through my normal, what I do for every team, then I'm gonna go really in depth on everything the Warriors have available to them this offseason. So if you're interested, stick around. If not, stay for however long you're interested. I really don't care. But today we are talking about the Golden State Warriors. My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, subscribe and let's get into it. The one and only Steph Curry, 2-time MVP, 3-time champion. How quickly you all forget. This season was not a great one for the Dubs. Steph Curry broke his hand in late October, came back and played exactly one game before the season was suspended because of the pandemic, and so it's been a very, very long time since we've seen Steph play basketball. Over a year since, the start of the year, and then he just had that one game in between. So us Warriors fans have been really, really, just ready for the season to start already so that we can get Steph and Klay back. And Steph Curry, to me, is still a top 2-3 player in the NBA. He's gonna still be very good. The hand injury is not gonna hinder him. That's obviously something that's not going to hurt him long term. Even though it was a bad break, it's not like it's a knee or a leg thing. It's not gonna affect his speed, his athleticism, his shooting, ball handling, whatever. It's all gonna be back. It's all gonna be there. And yes, he is 32 years old, but he is a guy who his game will translate well as he ages. He can still rely on the shooting and the ball handling and the passing and all of that. Steph Curry's going to age very well. I think, Steve Nash as a point guard aging into his 30s, how Chris Paul is still playing up to, the same level that we've seen him as he's entering his mid and late 30s. So Steph Curry, to me, is still going to be a very elite NBA player for the next probably 4 or 5 seasons. And this is a guy who, is clearly one of the best players in the league, and y'all better give him his respect because I see too many people disrespecting Steph Curry on the regular, and I will not stand for it. So Steph is my guy. I love him to death, and I'm just really, really excited to get him back and to watch Steph shoot that basketball again. In a similar situation is Klay Thompson, and if you don't know, Klay is my favorite player in the league. He, I love watching him play, one of probably the best catch and shoot player of all time, a great two-way defender on the wing. He really helps shore up the defense, and certainly he is a guy who the Warriors are going to need to be back and healthy if they are going to be looking to win more titles, and they absolutely will be. And so Klay, yes, he is coming off the ACL tear, and some people have raised concerns about whether or not he's going to look the same. To me, I think he'll be fine. ACL injuries are kind of weird. It depends on what type of player that it is and how bad of a tear it was and which leg and all that kind of stuff. But I think Klay will be fine. He's a guy who doesn't rely too heavily on his athleticism. It's mostly catch and shoot ability. Yes, it might affect his defense slightly and his ability to cut off ball, and he might just lose like a half a step. He'll be just a little bit, a little more subdued, not quite the version of Klay that we've seen in the past, but I really do think that he'll come back strong from this injury. And yes, I'm probably biased, but if you look at a guy like Zach LaVine, who has had ACL tears in the past, there's been a lot of other players who have been able to come back and be just as productive as they were before. And so if anybody can do that, it's Klay Thompson, because just that catch and shoot ability is still going to stay intact. He's one of the best shooters in the league, and he is a guy who is going to be able to come back strong and definitely be a key to Warriors title runs in the future. And I still think they've got a lot left in the tank, and the Warriors certainly missed Steph and Klay last year. It was tough watching them without the Splash Brothers, but I'm just really excited to get them both back on the court. We have not seen Klay in like a year and a half now. It's going to be a crazy long time since we've seen him play basketball, and when he went down in that game 6 versus the Raptors, that was some of the best basketball I've ever seen him play. He was on fire in that game, shooting the lights out, and I still hold firm to this day, if Klay Thompson does not go down with an injury in that series, even without Kevin Durant, the Warriors would have won. They would have come back from down 3-1 and beat the Raptors. Klay was playing too well. Steph was playing too well. Draymond is even playing well in that series. And they had the Raptors, on the ropes. And if Klay didn't go down, I really do think they would have won. That's probably just the homer in me. But, just looking at the way that series was going, it really felt like they were going to be able to come back. That ACL injury for him was devastating. But I'm certainly very excited to see the Splash Brothers back on the court together, and I'm very much looking forward to December 22nd when we can finally see them both back in action. And of course, Draymond Green, who has seen his value absolutely tank in the last year. The public perception of Draymond Green has really taken a turn for the worse after this season, and to me, this is exactly what I expected from him. I've known for a long time that Draymond is not a floor raiser for your team. He's a ceiling raiser. So if you have a bad team and you add Draymond Green on it, say you put Draymond on the Knicks next year, they would still be very bad. Okay, but if you put Draymond on a team like the Celtics or the Lakers or the Clippers, that would absolutely make all of them a lot better. Adding him to any of those teams would absolutely raise their ceiling. And in my opinion, if he's on the Clippers or the Celtics or the Heat, they win the title with Draymond on the team. And so this is a guy who, like I said, his value has tanked a lot. And I still think that he can be a good player. What we saw from him last year, he's not able to carry the offense on his own. He's not going to be available all the time. He was kind of checked out for most of the season and kind of let himself get out of shape and wasn't really trying at all. Only got up for probably 5 or 10 games the entire year. And so to me, Draymond is still a good player, and he is still a perfect fit next to Steph and Klay. Yes, the contract is probably a little expensive, and who knows how he'll age as he gets more into his 30s, but I think for the next, 2-3 seasons, I think it's in the Warriors' best interest to keep him around, because really what I think you'll see from Draymond is near the start of the year, he'll probably take a little bit to get himself back into game shape. But when the playoffs roll around this season, I think we'll see a similar version of Draymond Green as we've seen in the past. He probably won't hit that same level as he peaked around 2017, 2018. A couple of those series against the Rockets. He had a really good series against Portland last year, was playing well in the finals, like I mentioned. And so I still think he's got a lot left in him. Yes, it's been a while since we've seen it, but really Draymond is a guy who will turn up when the lights are the brightest. He always plays well in the close games. He's not a great shooter, but he'll hit a clutch shot. And so Draymond, I still believe in him. I think he can definitely still be a productive player, and he will be a key part of the Warriors championship teams moving forward. He's a guy who they're definitely going to have to rely on to keep his defense and his defense up to par, and he's going to be the anchor there. And his passing ability, playmaking, and just his intensity, he's the leader of the locker room. And so Draymond is a guy who I think he's going to be back with a vengeance next year, and we're going to see a similar level as we saw the last time the Warriors were competitive. And then there's the case of Andrew Wiggins, and this one is pretty weird for me because I have talked myself into it. At the time of the trade, I didn't like it. I didn't think it was a good move. I thought that they were, giving up D'Lo and getting back a bad contract. But looking at it further, the Minnesota pick next year is a pretty valuable asset. And Wiggins, if he's ever going to be successful in an NBA system, it's with the Warriors. They're going to be able to get the most out of him. He'll get open shots. They'll be able to focus his efforts on the defensive end. And theoretically, this is going to be a system that's going to get, the most out of Andrew Wiggins. So if he's not able to be successful here, then it's just going to be a wrap for him. But for me, we've seen a lot of Wiggins trade rumors over the past couple months, and we're going to continue to see them over the next week or so as we go up to the draft and even into free agency. I'm sure that we will see, Wiggins for this, whatever. And to me, I think it's more likely than not that they just hold on to him. If there's a superstar trade out there available, I would do it, but it's looking like Bradley Beal's probably not going to be available. Giannis is probably not going to be available right now. That's kind of a pipe dream anyway. But if you're going to get Giannis, then sure. And, if they're going to be trading for any other superstar, Wiggins has to be included for salary matching purposes. Anybody making more than their trade exception, because obviously they're not trading Steph, they're not trading Klay unless maybe in a Giannis deal, but that's kind of a long shot. And then Draymond, like I mentioned, I don't think they're trading him, and a lot of teams probably view him as a worse asset anyway. So Wiggins, he's going to be in a lot of trade rumors. I think not necessarily that it makes the most sense, but I think the inevitability is probably that he's just going to stay at least for one more year, maybe next off season if somebody else becomes available, whatever. But I don't think it necessarily makes sense to trade him for a guy like Drew Holiday or Kevin Love or LaMarcus Aldridge or whoever it is. None of those guys I think are really substantially that much better than Wiggins. Probably Drew Holiday is, but I think he fills a similar role, and giving up significant assets to, get a slight upgrade probably doesn't make a ton of sense. LaMarcus Aldridge is old and an expiring contract. Stay the hell away from that. And then who was the other guy I said? Kevin Love. Nah, I'm good. I don't think that really is a fit either. So I just think it makes sense to hold on to him unless for whatever reason you can get a Bradley Beal or obviously Giannis. That's a big long shot, but if you can pull it off, sure. And really, I just think there's probably not going to be a trade out there for Wiggins. If the Warriors are using some of their picks to either trade down in the draft or trade next year's Minnesota pick or, whatever else, it's probably going to be more for a guy that fits into their trade exception, which I'll get to in a second. But Wiggins, it feels like he's going to stick around in the Warriors uniform at least for another year because I just don't feel like there's a trade out there for him right now. And I do think he's a pretty solid fit with the guys that they have on the roster. And I think he'll be able to be productive next year. That's probably the optimist in me. But, it seems on paper that this should work out for him. And here's the cap sheet. They have no expiring contracts. Everybody on the team is signed for next year. They have a lot of these guys at the bottom of the roster that they're non-fully guaranteed, pretty small guarantees. And a lot of these guys, they were like tryouts basically last year. They weren't trying to win many games, so they're bringing in guys who they feel like can fill out the bottom of the rotation, young guys who might have a chance to be something in the NBA. So Juan Toscano-Anderson, Kai Bowman, and Michael Mulder, all three are in a very similar situation. They have contracts for next year, but none of them are guaranteed to make the team, and it's going to depend on how many veterans the Warriors bring in camp and, how well these young guys perform in camp as compared to whoever they bring in to compete for a roster spot, because I don't think they have enough roster spots for all three of these guys to make the team. One or two of them will probably make it, but I think at least one of these guys is most likely going to end up being cut and maybe go down to the G League team or get on a two-way deal or something like that, and they'll be able to play. Or, potentially with everything going on in the pandemic, we've heard rumors that there's going to be more roster exceptions and more ways to fill out the roster in case there's an outbreak on the team and stuff. So if you're allowed to have a deeper roster, then these guys can probably stick around. But I like all three of those players. I think it's great to have options like this because you can cut them for no additional cost, and if you keep them, it's very cheap players, which the Warriors definitely need. And so anything that these guys can turn into is a bonus. Marquise Chris is going to stick around. He is going to be, at worst, a backup center. He might start depending on who they draft, but he'll be in that center rotation and he'll get to play. Damian Lee is also one of those non-guaranteed, but his roster spot's a little more secure, I feel like. And then you have a couple of these young guys, Jordan Poole, Alan Smiley-Each, Eric Paschall. Pascal is a guy who I think the Warriors are relying on to develop and become, part of that rotation. Right now, he's like the 7th or the 8th man on a championship team. I think he can fill that role if he can get even better and become more of like a 6th man type scorer. Then I really do feel like, Pascal is on a good trajectory. It makes sense that he was ready to play right away. He was, I believe, a 4-year college player, 4-year college player, and he was ready to come into the NBA and play right away. And I was very pleasantly surprised with Pascal's rookie season. If the shot comes around a little bit more, I think he's going to be a really, really solid player and certainly a good option off the bench. And again, a very cheap player still on that second round rookie contract. Kevon Looney is the other guy. If he can ever get healthy, last year he was just not healthy at any point. It was a good year for him to not be healthy, but everything we've heard out of them in the last couple of weeks have said, that Looney is healthy now and he's back and ready to play. So hopefully all of that's true and we can get him back, because he was a key piece for, especially that last run to the finals, and even the year before. He was very, very valuable to them. Good perimeter defender, a guy who can, get in the middle, get you a couple buckets, but not really a scorer, but really just great defensively in the paint, and he can guards on the outside. So Looney is a guy who I really, really like, and, he has been thrown into a couple trades for salary matching purposes, because that's $5 million-ish salary. If you have to facilitate a huge trade, then sure, but don't just dump Looney for nothing. I think the Warriors are smart enough not to. And then above that, there's just the 4 guys that I've talked about already. So really what this roster is going to be is that core 4. You can include Wiggins as part of that core. I think the Warriors view him that way at this moment. That core 4, Looney I think is secured, and then Pascal is going to be in the rotation. And then really the back end of this rotation is going to be a mix of a couple of these guys that are already on the roster, and then they're bringing in a couple guys for camp, and obviously whoever they draft. And then as well as the guy who they bring into the trade exception. That brings me to the trade exception. They have $17.2 million. They can acquire a player making, that much without sending out any salary in return. That was created from the Andre Iguodala trade last year. And I hope that they use it. There's been rumors that they're not going to use it because they have to save money, because there's not going to be fans and they're going to have to pay the luxury tax and blah, blah, blah. Cry me a river, Joe Lacob. You're rich as all whatever, and Chase Center, yes, there's probably not going to be fans, although we do have, that thing that they're trying to do testing for fans before games so that they can fill the arena. And if all of that can work out logistically, that would be amazing, and it would be a great first step for getting fans back in the arena for the NBA. But, that's going to cost them a lot of money. If you can get fans back, you can recoup some of that. But it makes me optimistic that the team is going to be willing to spend this offseason. The roster is already very expensive, but getting a guy in that trade exception, I think he can really, really, really help them. And I will go into who specifically I think they should target later on. But using that trade exception is certainly a way that you can absolutely improve this roster and get somebody who can play real rotational minutes for you and close games. And I really think that they need another player if they are really serious about pushing for titles in the next 2 to 3 years. So I do hope that ownership decides to spend for that trade exception and bring somebody in, whether that's in the form of trading down in the draft or just getting somebody in a salary dump that another team doesn't want, or giving up a future pick or a second round pick, whatever. I think that is something that is definitely worth doing. And so to me, the rotation next year is going to be Steph, Klay, Wiggins, Draymond, Looney, Chris, Pascal, whoever you pick in the draft, and then you can mix and match between Bowman, Toscano, Mulder, Lee, Poole. All of these guys are going to have chances to play. They're not all going to be able to actually get minutes on the roster, but they're all going to have a shot because it's pretty wide open past those core players, and everybody's going to be able to have a chance to earn them some minutes. All right, so what's the plan? What should the Warriors do? Because they have a lot of different directions they can go in. They have the second overall pick in the draft. They're going to have their choice, depending on what the Timberwolves do at 1, but they're going to have a chance to get James Wiseman or Anthony Edwards or Denny Avdia, or trade down for somebody else. For a while, for most of the offseason, in my mind, it's been the best idea to trade down and get somebody into the trade exception, in the process of trading down in the draft. And maybe even trade down multiple times if you can continue getting assets. And I think I still feel that way, but I have been leaning a little bit more back towards just sticking and selecting somebody there. And I really have no idea what they're going to do. I'm not sure if the right trade is going to be there for them on draft night. And before, I felt like I was even undervaluing that pick. It feels like, for the most part, people were like, oh, they could, trade with Phoenix and get number 10 and Kelly Oubre for number 2, and that's a fair deal. Or they can trade with Boston and get number 14 and Marcus Smart, and Boston gets number 2. Or they can trade with San Antonio, get number 11 and Rudy Gay, and they can, San Antonio gets up and gets number 2. Or, you can draw all of these deals where effectively they're trading down 8 or 10 spots and getting a player in the trade exception. And initially, a lot of people thought that was pretty good value for the second pick, but now it feels like, for the most part, people have readjusted how much the second pick is worth, and it's probably worth a little bit more than, a fringe rotation player that fits into that trade exception. I like a lot of those guys, but a lot of those other teams are probably going to have to give up maybe a little bit more to get up as high as number 2. And so hopefully, if they can get something good out of it, maybe get a future pick out of any of these teams, or another player that potentially fits still under that salary, maybe like a rookie on a cheap deal. You can talk about that all you want, and getting any of those players, and you can debate value and how much the second pick is actually worth in a weak draft, and how much is Marcus Smart worth to the Celtics, how much is Kelly Oubre worth to Phoenix, and on and on and on. So, I just don't think we're going to know exactly what they can do until, they are on the clock picking number 2. After the Timberwolves have selected number 1, the Warriors are going to be on the clock, and we're going to say, I have no idea. If they stay, so now we're going into my opinion, right? If they stay at 2, I think the best player to select there is probably going to be James Wiseman. It looks like he's going to be available. I don't think it makes sense for Minnesota to select him, and they probably won't. So they're going to have the chance to get Wiseman on the team. And to me, I think the need for a center is overblown. A lot of people are like, oh, the Warriors need a center. They don't have a starting center on the roster. They need somebody to come in and fill that spot. So obviously that means they're going to pick James Wiseman. I don't necessarily feel that way, because I do think that you can get a serviceable starting center in free agency, especially in this free agent class. There's a lot of really good centers out there that are probably going to be available for Golden State. Depends on if any of these guys are going to be willing to take a salary cut. In an ideal world, they get Serge Ibaka. Serge Ibaka would be an amazing fit with the Warriors, and if you can get him on that mid-level exception around, $5 million or however much it is, if you can get him to agree to that taxpayer mid-level, that would be awesome for them. They could bring in a guy with championship pedigree. He can pick and pop, good defensively still, and I think Serge Ibaka is the perfect fit. But you probably won't be able to get him. He's going to maybe be searching for a little bit more money. He's not quite at the phase in his career where he's going to be willing to taste a championship yet. So you also have a guy like Aaron Baines or Derek Favors, or there's a lot of centers out there on the market, and I think the Warriors will be able to get at least one of them to agree to come in for that camp. So, don't just draft James Wiseman because you need a center. Draft him because you feel like he's the best player available. Regardless of who you pick, unless it is James Wiseman, anybody else is going to come off the bench for this team, right? So it doesn't really matter based on fit. If Anthony Edwards is there, I think he would be a good choice. Hopefully they can teach him to be a little bit more efficient, improve his shot, and figure out how to play winning basketball. Even LaMelo Ball, who I don't think they will take LaMelo. Disclaimer, I don't think they're going to take him. It just doesn't feel like a Warriors move to me. But if they did, even he would fit okay. He can come off the bench, be a playmaker, has some good size, and some good scoring touch as well. So, or Denny Avdia, who feels like a Steve Kerr type of guy, a really smart player, a good team defender, good playmaker as well. The shot, again, like with a lot of these top players, the shot is a little questionable. But if you can get into Denny Avdia, I feel like he would fit well in the system. If you're trading down, Isaac Okoro is a great target. He's a winning player. Again, his shot is not great, but he's a guy who he can probably develop in a winning system, be a decent playmaker. There's comparisons to Andre Iguodala. Debate that if you want, but certainly if he could fill that role, that would be a major win for this team. You can go on and on about draft fits. If they're staying at 2, I think the best fit is James Wiseman. If you're trading down, I like Okoro. I like Devin Vassell as well, who is also a kind of a similar player, who is a long wing and a pretty solid defender, okay playmaking. The shot is, I've said it 5 times now, the shot is suspect. But that's all going to be options for them on draft night. And like I said, I have no idea what is going to happen. And so, whether it's a trade down or picking Wiseman at 2 or even Edwards if he's there, all of them, here's what's going to happen. I'll tell you this right now. Whatever they do on draft night, I'm probably going to talk myself into it. I'm just going to say, okay, sure, I'll wait until I see it, but I feel like that was a good choice. That's probably what I'm going to do. Regardless of what they do, I do have faith in the Warriors front office to make the right decision, and hopefully they'll use that trade exception. And I do think that whatever they do on draft night, I think they'll have a really good reason for it, and they've had all year to scout. And so all of these guys, I'm sure that they are going crazy debating who they think is the best player, because we haven't seen any of them play in 9 months. But we're just looking at really old film, and so I'm sure that they have very developed opinions on all of these draft prospects, and so whoever they choose, I'm probably going to talk myself into it, and we'll just have to wait and see if it works out. All right, y'all. So now I'm going to go over a couple of players that fit into the trade exception. I'm going to just give you my list of guys that I think should be on the target list, whether that's moving down in the lottery or even just not even worrying about the second pick and giving a different asset up, a future Warriors pick, not the Timberwolves pick, but a future Dubs pick or a second rounder or something in order to be able to get, a player into that trade exception. If another team wants to do a salary dump, whatever, you can speculate on how much value these guys would be worth, but these are who I think they should look at. I already mentioned Marcus Smart from Boston, Kelly Oubre, and then Rudy Gay I talked about as well. Throw into this group JJ Redick. Let's see. I'm going to look at my list here, okay? JJ Redick, Josh Richardson, Joe Ingles from the Jazz, Dennis Schroder, Robert Covington, PJ Tucker. Let's see here. I'm just looking at a list of teams and who they might have on the roster that's available for us. Karis LeVert from Brooklyn if they want to give him up, but I don't think they'll deal him there. Kelly Olynyk maybe. Miles Turner, who is a little bit too expensive for the trade exception. They'd have to flip it for an expiring contract that fits under and then flip that contract for Miles Turner. Same deal with Aaron Gordon from the Magic, who fits in that group. Guys who are a little too expensive, but with some magic, you can make it work. And then as well, a couple of guys from the Mavericks, because we know the Mavericks are trying to potentially move up. Maybe Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell, Seth Curry, Dorian Finney-Smith, whoever. I talked about kind of those tradable pieces in that Mavericks video from a couple weeks ago. From the Kings, guys like Nemanja Bjelica, Richaun Holmes, who, both of those players would fit into that exception. From the Spurs, I said Rudy Gay already, but Patty Mills, who's also probably available. Derrick Rose from the Pistons. Let's see here. You can maybe, Kevin Huerter wouldn't fill the whole exception, but he could take part of it if you're trading down with the Hawks. And I think that's pretty much it. Even like Eric Bledsoe from the Bucks, although I don't love that fit, but he's surely available. That's not a short list, but a list of players who might be available that fits into that exception. Out of all of those, the guys that I like the most, Marcus Smart, I think is my number one choice. I don't know if Boston's willing to give him up, and how much value he holds to them. But if they are trying to move up to that second overall pick, maybe you would have to get something else. Boston would have to give up something else to get up that high. But I do really, really like Marcus Smart if the Warriors are able to get him. I think he fits amazingly well on this roster. Great defender, can hit some shots, and just a winning basketball player. I like Dennis Schroder from the Thunder. He's surely available, and he could be an awesome backup point guard, secondary ball handler. We saw him play really, really well next to Chris Paul last year, so I like the Dennis Schroder fit. I like the Kelly Oubre fit, even though his value has seemed like gone down over the course of the offseason, but I think he 3-and-D wing can come in and hit some shots. I've seen him hit a lot of corner threes, so that's a guy who I think would fit pretty well. Patty Mills, similar to Schroder, backup point guard role type of guy. Joe Ingles from the Jazz, good three-point shooter, decent defender off the bench as well. I think he could come in and play well. And that's, I think, where I'm going to cut myself off because I'm going to ramble too much about guys who fit into the trade exception. But I lied to you. Miles Turner would also be great if you can do that crazy flip. Miles Turner and Aaron Gordon both are a little too expensive, but if you can get either of those two, I think those would both be great fits. That's where I'm cutting myself off. That's my list of guys who I really think could come in and make a difference for them next year. And now that we're done with the trade exception stuff, let's talk about potentially guys that they might bring in on the free agent market on veteran minimum deals. They can come in and round out the rest of this rotation. We've seen videos and photos of Jeremy Lin working out with some of the Warriors over the past week or so. He was doing a workout with like Steph Curry, Eric Pascal, Looney, I believe, was there, a couple other guys from the roster. In my mind, the Jeremy Lin signing is already done. I think they've already agreed to a veteran minimum with him to bring him in, at least for training camp. But I think that they've already agreed on that. Obviously, you can't announce deals before free agency opens. It's technically illegal, tampering, whatever. But in my opinion, Jeremy Lin's already agreed to a deal. You could potentially say the same thing about Kent Bazemore. We don't have any evidence of that, but Kent Bazemore is a guy who I believe is friends with Steph Curry, and he, on a veteran minimum deal, could come in and fill that wing role, in a couple minutes off the bench. I think he'd be a good veteran pickup. Potentially Glenn Robinson, who they traded away last year, but he has a player option with Philly, might decline that, and I know that he loved it when he was in Golden State, even though they were bad. And we've heard rumors about him potentially coming back and re-signing with the team even after they traded him away. That would also not be a bad option. And then I mentioned earlier filling the need for a big man, so Aaron Baines, Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol, Derek Favors. If any of those guys are willing to take that mid-level exception or a veteran minimum, that would be awesome for them. Bring in a quality big man who's looking to chase a championship. That would be certainly very ideal for the team. Even if they do draft Wiseman, they could probably use another center on the roster to pair with Marquise Chris and Kevon Looney. So those are some potential free agent fits there. And that, I think, covers everything. That's where I'm going to cut it off. We talked about guys who fit into the trade exception. We talked about the draft. We talked about minimum free agents. And that is all of the knowledge that I have accumulated over the longest offseason known to man. The Warriors offseason basically started in late October when Steph Curry broke his hand, because at that point we knew the season was over, and we've now pivoted to the following year. So this is over a year of speculation and talking with other Warriors fans about the draft, about potential fits in the trade exception, about free agency, all of that stuff. So that is all I have for you tonight. And that is going to mark the end of the season preview series. This is team 30 out of 30. I saved the best for last, and we are done. This is going up a couple days before the draft. I'm really, really happy with how all of these turned out. I think I've definitely improved a lot with the way that the content has gone. I've learned a lot about how everything works with YouTube and editing and all sorts of stuff like that. So thank you all for following along. I don't know how many people are still watching this video. It's certainly going to be a long one. But thank you guys for tuning in. The grind does not stop here. I will be continuing to produce content, of course, as we go through the off season and getting closer to the season beginning. There's going to be a lot happening over the next week or so, and so I will be back, with some more videos for you. But this is the end of the season preview and this format. So thanks you guys all very much for watching. Thank you to what I believe I'm at 37 subscribers on the channel right now, which is not a lot, but we're working on it. My goal, I'm going to try to get to 100 before the end of the year. Don't know if we can get there, but if I can get to 100 before December 31st, that would be awesome. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening to me ramble for probably 30-40 minutes about the Golden State Warriors. And that's going to be it for me. And I will see you guys within a couple of days with the next video. And I'll see y'all in the next one.